Hi guys, and welcome back to Maltbox, the non-chill filtered whiskey blog. I'm Andy and I'm back here today with another whiskey review. This is the fourth and final part of the little mini-series that I've been doing recently, focusing on blended whiskey, the different types, the different brands, and what it has to offer. So far, we've looked at a couple of blended malts from J.G. Thompson, who are new boys on the block. We've looked at a Poggi from Bimber, which really interested, sort of like blended malt Scotch whisky that is actually been finished in English whiskey casks and isn't actually technically blended malt Scotch whisky either. We've also looked at a 15-year-old antiquary from the Tomatin guys. That's a blended Scotch that's been finished in Bordeaux casks. Now, I've actually switched out the whisky that I was originally going to look at today. And there's a reason behind it, because I consistently bang on about when I bid on whiskies at auction, I don't go big. I'm a bottom feeder. I am the bottom of the food chain, and I'm okay with that. And the reason that I say that is because I tend to pick off blended whiskies, older blended whiskies at auction. Don't get me wrong, I'll put bids on single malts. Recently, I've just won a Bimber, for example, the second Selfridges bottle. I've got the new one, but I didn't have the old one, so I bought one of those. Below RRP, I might add. However, before fees, obviously. However, normally I just go for the blends. Some of these blends don't even exist anymore as brands. The one that I'm looking at today is one of those purchases. And I think it's important for me to kind of like look at this because it's a little bit of a time capsule and I'm really into that kind of thing. I was born in the late 80s, so, you know, whiskey's distilled in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It's before my time. And I love that kind of ability just to open a bottle, like pop a cork, unscrew a lid, and be able to step back in time in that way. It's really cool. It's the only way I'm ever going to be able to afford to step back in time, even if time travel becomes a thing, because I'm not going to be able to afford to do it. It's going to be Bezos, Branson and co, isn't it? Oh, just stepping into the old time machine. Fantastic. I'll just stay here, shall I? So, with that in mind, the whiskey that I'm going to be looking at today is a brand that you don't really see a lot in the UK. It's a massive export brand. I believe it's very, very popular in countries like Portugal, France, Russia. It's a whiskey whose brand started in the mid-60s following a purchase by Martini Rossi of the Martini Vermouth fame. That brand was then bought by Bacardi, I think in the 80s, perhaps. With that purchase came distilleries such as Macduff into the Bacardi portfolio. So ultimately, this is a brand owned by Bacardi as we know it today. However, I believe this bottle predates that purchase, and I'll tell you why. So here it is. This is William Lawsons blended Scotch whisky, and I am very excited to show you this and try this with you because I've not opened this. I'm opening this for you tonight. And there it is. William Lawsons blended Scotch whisky, rare light Scotch whisky, if you go from the label. And there it is. Now, this used to be called something different. It was rebranded to William Lawsons prior to the Bacardi acquisition, but just after the initial Martini acquisition, because they used to be based in Liverpool, this company that made this whiskey. Obviously, the whiskies were Scotch whiskies, but they were based in Liverpool. They relocated to Coat Bridge in Scotland after the purchase, and it says here on the label, William Lawson Distillers Limited, Coat Bridge and Macduff, Scotland. Just there on the bottom. And these are the kind of like little bits, these nuggets of information that I love and kind of deciphering. There's no barcode on the back, so this predates barcodes. This is also not measured in millilitres. This is measured in fluid ounces. So it's before the decimalisation in the UK. And there's the back label. I'm not saying that you can read any of it, guys, but I mean, hopefully it gives you the opportunity to see it. There's also this little thing on the bottom that says distilled and bottled in Scotland under British government supervision. Now that's something you will find on quite a lot of older Scotch whiskies. It's very, very old school. Now, I know for a fact that this was bottled for the Italian export market. Firstly, because we've got an export tag on the top. So you know like when you go to duty free And sometimes you see whiskies with these little things on. That's what it is. It's a seal. It also says on the side, and Italians, I'm so sorry, I try to speak Italian, I do a little bit, but Importato da Martini and Rossi SPA Torino. I'm not going to read the rest, but needless to say, imported by Martini and Rossi. This is after they purchased this brand and rebranded it to William Lawsons and relocated to Coatbridge. Now that happened in 1963, I think, off the top of my head. It's either 63 or 65. And this is what I love about this. I love the detective work that you have to find about some of these old blends. So cool. Really is. Now, they rebranded to William Lawsons because I think there was another whiskey at the time called, I want to say Duncan. It sounded like Lawson anyway, and they wanted to kind of make sure that it didn't sound exactly like it, basically, so they changed the name. But here we go. So, oh man, it's breaking the seal. I always like to open my bottles. This cost me 25 quid. In fact, I tell a lie, it was 20 quid. I've had this on the shelf for about 12 months, maybe a little bit longer, because I've just not found an opportunity to drink it. It's not the kind of thing that you sit there and think, do you know what I really fancy? I really fancy a William Lawsons from 1965. That's just not how I'm wired. So with that in mind, I'm going to open this for you now, guys. Really excited. Let's give it a go. Don't get me wrong, this is not like opening a 1950s Macallan or a 1970s Port Ellen. I get that. I totally get that. But it's a piece of history still to me. It is. I love sharing in the experience. And someone's been to Italy, brought it back, had it in a cupboard for like 40 or 50 years. Longer than that in theory. And then just put it up at auction. I mean, that thing's been places. Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, okay, right. Luckily, it's a screw cap. On some older ones, you get like this horrible spring cap. I think that predates this. That's like 30s, early to mid 40s, and prior to that, this screw cap is much more modern. Now, another important thing to look at when you're buying whiskey in general, from auctions in particular, I'll put the lid back on, fill level. Now, this gives you a good indication of how tight, airtight the seal is, whether it be a cork, be it a screw top. This is a pretty good fill level considering, if you can see that there, it's right up to there still, into the neck, which is great. Sometimes if whiskies are stored in a bad way, windowsills, next to radiators, honestly, in the airing cupboard, next to the boiler or something, you're going to lose a lot more whiskey. And it's a bit like storing wine in a way. You've got to be careful about how it's stored. Now, this is going to take a little while to open up. Now, this is bottled at 40%. This thing hasn't been opened. This is the first exposure it's had to the air generally for like over 50 years. That's crazy. That is crazy. It is, as it says on the front, rare light. Now, it's marketed as that, mainly because a lot of Scotch whisky was marketed like that to European countries, warmer climates, that wanted lighter whiskies. If you're in the middle of a Greek summer at 40 degrees C, it's personal preference, I understand this, but one of the last things you're probably thinking of drinking is a Lafroig or an Ardbeg or something like that. I'm going to have loads of comments saying I'm Greek and I drink Ardbeg in 55 degrees and that's fine. But generally speaking, back in the day, light was a positive. To self-style it as being light, enjoyable, drinkable, that's what they were aiming for. And that's why they've done that. And that's why, in a way, it's become so popular. But what I can't really fathom as to why it's not really made a big impact in the UK market. I googled this before I started the review just to make sure I wasn't going mad. The whiskey shop had a link, sold out. Probably hasn't been stocked for a while. Doesn't look too dissimilar from this bottle now. Amazon just redirects you to Johnny Walker Red. I think there was some random wine website that had a link for it, but then as soon as you click on it, it gives you the bottle price in euros. So that's not in the UK. So yeah, it's a brand you're not really going to see much of over here. Now, colour, I do not know if this is natural colour or non-chill filtered or anything like that, because if we don't see that on a bottle nowadays, when we've been crying out for transparency for the last 10 years, do you really think you'd have seen that in the 60s? Nobody gave a shit in the 60s. A lot of people nowadays don't either, and I think that's very, very fine. Honestly, it is. Absolutely fine. Not everyone's bothered about it. It's a mass market, blended Scotch whisky. Chances are this will have some sort of colouring added or be chill filtered in the least. I don't even know, if I'm being perfectly honest, if chill filtration was a thing back then. I don't. I'm not versed in that kind of knowledge, I'm happy to admit. So initially, let's see, 50 years in the bottle. What this has. Well, what are we now? 2022. Wow, that's going to be a long time in the bottle. Oh, wow, okay, right. This might need a little bit longer. I'm conscious this might be a long review when I didn't mean to. I kind of like drilled down a little bit too much, but now this is very, very interesting. This is, if you hear people say in the industry, an old school profile, this is the kind of thing that they're talking about. It's just heavy, oily, crunchy almost. Got aniseed. Lots of aniseed. Lots of green apple. Oily. Smells like extra virgin olive oil as well. There's maltiness in there. There's almost a smokiness in the back as well, but it's not like, a lot of smoke that I've had in whiskey before. It's almost like eucalyptusy kind of mentholy smoke. Virgin on like cigar smoke. But as far as I was aware, from the research that I did into this, it wasn't touted as a peated whiskey, and it doesn't smell like one. It's just, there's something there in the background that's just stitching everything together. This is cool. This is why I like doing stuff like this. It's all well and good, like, me reviewing the latest release or whatever else, but sometimes I like a little bit out of the ordinary. Very cool indeed. Becomes sweeter. If you're not in the UK, you might not know what these are, but Google it. Dolly mixtures. These are very powdery, icing-y sweets. They're basically like little cubes of icing in different flavours, effectively. Oh, it's developing all the time. Apple, yes, again. Pastry, again. He's now coming through. We've got vanilla. But that kind of oily, thick, clunky, almost like cinder toffee profile in the background is still there all the way through it. In the glass, the legs aren't particularly slow on the glass, but it smells thick, it smells oily. Bit of black pepper in there as well now. Now, full disclosure, I'm going to leave this open for a few months, continue to dip back into it. I'm really excited to see what this has on the palate. I really am. On the palate. Okay. Right. Very much a dram of two halves. Texture. The texture was fantastic. Oily. My lips have this kind of film on. Initial sweetness, initial toffee. A burst of that green apple again from the palate. From the nose, should I say. And then it all goes a bit weird. It goes silent. It just drops off a cliff. For about 2 or 3 seconds. And then from nowhere, this kind of like pepper and that eucalyptus that I mentioned on the nose kind of comes back from nowhere. And there's that smoke again, but it's not, I can't explain it. It's not like smoke as you know it. It's a bit like eating like a burnt piece of toast, or if you get a pizza crust that's overdone and you get that little bit of char on it. It's kind of like that. And then that sweetness sort of kicks that out of the way. But for me, I mean, I'm still getting the finish. It's sweet, but that almost menthol eucalyptus quality is coming through it. I have very rarely picked up things like eucalyptus and menthol on whiskey. A lot of people identify it a lot easier than I do. However, for me on the palate, it's just there. It's like a menthol cigarette in a sense. And I've not smoked for a number of years. I used to smoke, and I've not smoked for about 15 years. But I remember what they taste like, and it's kind of got that smokiness, and then all of a sudden that very sharp, minty, mentholy note. This is so cool. Fruit salad. I'm not getting attacked by one. I've not just spotted, fruit salad. Forgot about that. It's just kind of come out. It's like developing all the time. It's like more exotic fruit, pineapple, glacé cherry a bit. You know, like what I describe it as well. You know, the fruit salad in a can, the Del Monte stuff. It's like that at the start. I love doing stuff like this, and I love sharing stuff like this with you. And I'm sorry that I've kind of rambled on. But I wanted to give this a chance and some time in the glass while I talked, and I'm glad I did, because it's developed and it's nice. It's very, very nice. Very different, very interesting. Very, for me, in terms of my collection, quite unique. I do have other old bottles from the 60s and the 70s. I had one at one point from the 30s, which was pretty cool. A bottle of Teachers from the 30s, and that was fantastic when I had it. I've had a 1950 Hankey Bannister, which still said, think like God Save the King on it, I think. So it's prior to 1952 when the Queen got coronated. But considering, again, I wasn't born for, I mean, if this was bottled in like 1965, I wasn't born for nearly 30 years after that. And I'm over 30 years on from that date as well, worryingly. So it's really nice to be able to try this, particularly for 20 quid plus fees. I bemoaned before auction fees, particularly postage, 10 quid a bottle. At Scotch whisky auctions, for example, 10 quid a bottle. But if that's the price I have to pay to try a piece of history like this, then I'm okay with that. Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to. So guys, on that note, I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to box it off now. Thank you very much for watching. I'm on Instagram at maltboxwhiskey, maltboxwhiskey.com. See you soon.